Thank you, Blake. And I'd like to add my personal welcome to those of you that are joining us for the first time. We hope you're going to enjoy the session. And for those of you that have joined previously, welcome back and what you're doing. What I'd like to do first is to kind of explain what we do at Nsala around the concepts of mentoring. What we do is, first of all, we provide consulting. And in the manner of doing that, we provide a strategic planning process, which really helps the organization to look at how we're going to tie this to organizational objectives, how are we going to measure results, how are we going to be sure that we really have included all the elements to make sure that we aren't going to hit pitfalls once we roll out our program. In addition to that, we provide training. And we do that for mentors, for mentees, managers, supervisors, and program administrators. We do this in workshop format, webinar format, whatever's best for your organization. And then we provide our software as a service technology. It's the technology that ensures that your mentoring program is not going to become an administrative nightmare. And this is all the elements that ensure the sustainability of your program as you're going through. We want to make sure that your mentoring program is successful now, and it's going to be successful in 3, 4, and 5 years from now. And this is not something you're going to have to redo. So again, it's that sustainability. So let's get started and talk about best practices for managing mentoring in large organizations. So at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through our first poll?
I'd be delighted. First poll question is, what is the size of your organization? Broken into categories of less than 500, 500 to 1,000, 1 to 3,000, 3 to 10,000, or more than 10,000 employees. Results are coming in. Give that a few more seconds. Great. All right. Judy, the results are in. 11% responded that they have less than 500. 7% have in the range of 500 to 1,000. Another 7% in 1 to 3,000. About a third said 3,000 to 10,000, and 43% said they have more than 10,000 employees.
Okay, so it looks like the majority of the organizations here today are fairly large in scope in what they're doing with a lot of employees that are going to be really anxious to get into that mentoring program. So let's get started. What we're going to do as we go through today is we are, whoops, I'm sorry, looks like we're going backwards instead of forwards. I apologize. Okay, we're going to talk about the benefits of having a mentoring program within your organization. And then we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we know large organizations, face when they are rolling out a mentoring program. We're also going to walk you through what we see are some common mistakes that an organization makes when rolling out a mentoring program, and talk about some solutions to those pitfalls and that we know come up. And then, of course, we're going to have our Q&A area in doing that. But first, what I'd like to talk about is how large organizations that we work with really use mentoring in doing this. And one of the ways we've seen is around onboarding for new hires and what they're doing. And, this becomes very important because your new hires come in, they go through orientation, they're inundated with a lot of information, and then they begin to forget it. So pairing them with a mentor does a couple of things. First of all, it lets them feel more comfortable and more engaged with the organization and feeling that the organization really cares about them and what they're doing. And in addition to that, what we found is that it accelerates that learning process and getting people up to speed faster in what they're doing. Another way that we have seen organizations use mentoring is reinforcing They're learning and training. And at this point in time, what we're finding is that organizations are actually supplying mentors that are a part of the training programs they're rolling out. So that after you go to training, and again, we know that we don't retain everything. It's a part of the training program we go to. So the mentors are there to answer questions and to be a part of that reinforcement of the learning that happens after the training class. We've also seen it enhance corporate diversity and inclusion in doing that. And we have one organization we work with, and they've taken the mentoring all the way down to the factory floor. Now, talk about inclusion. This is real inclusion. And when we went through the training and the implementation of the program, I'm telling you, these people on the factory floor were really, really thrilled. They were so glad because normally they weren't a part of these kind of programs. They were a part of skill training a lot, but they didn't get to be a part of these types of programs, and they absolutely were thrilled in what they were doing. We have organizations that look at mentoring around career development. And I would say career development, succession pipeline, and leadership development, these three are probably the most common ways in which organizations look at mentoring and the focus that they want to put to their mentoring program. So at this point in time, Blake, if you could take us through our next poll and let's find out how our audience uses mentoring.
Great. Our next poll question is, what is the main focus of your mentoring program? We have categories of to grow your succession pipeline or leadership development. There's career development. Maybe you're onboarding new hires. If you want to reinforce learning from training or enhance corporate diversity. Results are coming in. Give that a few more seconds. Great. Share the results. 27% said they were doing it to grow the succession pipeline, leadership development. Vast majority said it's for the purpose of career development, and then 3% for each of onboarding, reinforcing learning, and enhancing diversity. What do you think about that, Judy?
Well, actually, this is pretty clear as to what we have seen up to this point. I liked the 20% in the succession pipeline, which probably does go along with career development and the leadership development in doing that. But it is good to know that, you know, these still seem to be the major areas that organizations are using it. But what we want to illustrate by this slide is getting people to understand there's a lot of ways in which you can use diversity. So don't forget about using, you can use mentoring. So don't forget about using it for your diversity programs, your onboarding, and to reinforce your learning from training and doing that and taking it forward. So great. Thank you, Blake. Okay, what we want to talk about now are some of the very specific benefits of a mentoring initiative within a large organization. Now, there's a lot of benefits for doing this, but we just want to, kind of highlight 5 of these that we feel are most important. First of all, we believe mentoring is one of the most cost-effective and time-efficient tools an organization has to develop their people. And the reason for that is you're using your internal talent in what you're doing. With mentoring, the learning is a lot more specific to the needs of the organization and to the needs of the individual in what they're doing. The mentee is able to learn from someone who has the experience of what it is they need to learn. It's kind of like the mentor's been there and done that in going forward. And in addition to that, mentoring allows for learning to take place when your organization development or your learning and development area is struggling with not enough resources to get everybody developed with what they want to be able to do. Now, it facilitates skills and cultural knowledge transfer within an organization. You know, one of the things that we all know is that every organization has its own culture. Every, quite honestly, division, department, and sometimes project groups, they all have their own culture. So when a mentee is learning a skill or knowledge area, they're not just learning that knowledge and skill, but they're learning how that is implemented within the organization's culture. It's a great, great learning tool in going forward. It also, mentoring reinforces the 70-20-10 development area. And we're actually going to get to this in a little more detail in just a moment. But the 70-20-10, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, talks about the fact that 10% of development comes from courses and reading, 20% from knowledge transfer, and 70% from on-the-job experience. So when you're talking about this, mentoring really is looking at about 90% of that 70-20-10 rule. It's knowledge transfer and also then equates to on-the-job experience in what you're doing. Now, it also, mentoring, when you're looking at it in a large organization, allows for learning to take place across wide distances in what you're doing. And this is what we call distance mentoring. It opens up a wider pool of candidates for people to participate and a wider pool of candidates for your matching and pairing in what you're doing. It really ensures the very best match. My best example of this is that we have an organization we work with. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the U.S. And there was an individual there as a mentee. And, you know, I'm sure we probably could have found a good mentor within the Albuquerque or at least the New Mexico area. But the best mentor for this individual, for what they wanted to learn, was sitting in India. So many times it's a difference between getting a good mentoring match and the very best in doing that. In addition to that, the biggest thing that we find out about distance mentoring is it opens up those silos that people get stuck in. And we all know the silos that exist in our organizations. And it really allows people to get to know each other. One of the comments that we get quite often in distance mentoring partnerships is individuals saying, you know, I never would have gotten to know that individual, and I certainly would have never gotten to know parts of that organization or department had it not been for the distance mentoring partnership. It really opens up an organization and what you're doing. And then last, it accelerates that onboarding process that we had talked about before. You know, a mentor can start individuals off on the right foot and successfully integrate them into the organization's culture. It really increases a new employee's self-confidence and makes them feel the organization really cares about them, and they're much higher engagement levels due to this. We also find the relationship can function two ways, because the new hire can provide some fresh ideas for the mentor. So it really can be a two-way street. And again, provides the new hire with an understanding of the organization's culture overall in what you're doing. So we also want to talk about some challenges that we know an organization can face when they are implementing a mentoring program. And one of the first challenges that you can face is communicating a consistent vision across various locations and channels. One of the things that we talk about when we talk about mentoring is, you know, the good news about mentoring is it's thousands of years old. And the bad news about mentoring is it's thousands of years old. And one of the things that we find is there are a lot of historical perceptions and misperceptions regarding the concepts of mentoring. So you put 50 people in a room and you could have 20 different perceptions regarding what a mentor is, what a mentee is, and what mentoring is overall. So you want to make sure that there is consistent communication throughout the organization. This can be a really large challenge. Another challenge can be establishing and connecting a pool of mentors. So it's not only finding them, getting them into a pool, but actually getting them connected. Monitoring high volumes of dispersed partnerships. When you're in a large organization and you have partnerships that are all over the globe, the country, whatever it might be, it's harder to keep track of all of that information and being able to, keep track of those partnerships. And then being able to manage and report accurately on a large volume of data. We talk to organizations in which the way that they've been managing their data is through spreadsheets. And by doing that, then when they need a report, they've got to put all these different spreadsheets together to get a report that someone wants. And that leads then to being able to measure results. And so that can be a real challenge in getting all that reporting together, getting accurate reporting, which would lead to then being able to measure results. So Blake, if you can take us through our next poll, we'd like to find out what kind of challenges our audience is experiencing.
Great. For our third poll question, for those of you that have a mentoring program presently in place, what do you find is your greatest challenge? Categories of communicating consistent vision across various locations, establishing and connecting a pool of mentors and mentees, monitoring high volumes of dispersed partnerships, managing and reporting accurately on a large volume of data, or is it just measuring results? A little bit more involved in terms of processing this question, so we'll give this a little bit extra time. Results are coming in. Going to give it a few more seconds. Great. 8% said that it was about communicating that consistent vision. 38% said it was about establishing that pool of mentors and mentees. And a good majority said the issue was measuring results. How about that, Judy?
Well, that's usually what we see. That measuring results is usually the most popular answer that we get in doing this, and it is important. We believe mentoring is a business strategy. This is not just a warm, fuzzy, feel-good program. It's a business strategy, and you should be able to measure your results on what you're doing. So again, that's one of the things that we hear, and we're going to talk about that a little more. Because, one of the things is that for the challenges that you have, we're accepting them, and we're going to help you with them. Because I can tell you that these are the common mistakes that we see organizations going through. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is failing to identify organizational objectives that support the mentoring initiative. The whole idea is, why are you doing this? And you need to be able to answer these two questions. First of all, what goals does your organization want to accomplish? And then how can a mentoring program help you achieve those goals? If you don't do this, the kind of loss you're going to experience is lack of management support presently and ongoing, lack of participant support presently and ongoing. And the reason for that is the fact that if it's not positioned as a business strategy and it's not tied to organizational goals, when the mentor and mentee are meeting, or the types of things, the interactions that they have, if there's something else going on, it will take precedence over meetings for the mentors and mentees. And yet, the mentoring process is development, and it's a business strategy, and it's important. And that's one of the things that we find organizations have got to understand. Otherwise, something else will always come in to take the place of the meetings between the mentor and the mentee. Because then I guarantee it's going to lead to mistake number 2, number 3, and number 4 that we're going to talk about in just a few moments. Now, the way that we help organizations to get through this is through a strategic planning workshop that I mentioned in the very beginning called MORE. And MORE stands for Mentoring, Organizational Readiness, and Effectiveness. And it is designed to help you as an organization establish, clear expectations, identify those organizational objectives that you're going to tie it to, and then make sure that you have got your success metrics in place and identified in what you're going to be doing. We take organizations through this, through a process that we call plan, implement, evaluate, and manage. And all 4 of those phases are identified in the MORE workshop, and elements are identified to make sure, again, you're not going to hit those pitfalls and make some mistakes in what you do going forward. The second most common mistake that we find is failing to track the developmental objectives of a dispersed mentee employee population. A lot of times this is due to time and resource constraints in what you have. And, that's going to cost you. And what that costs you is an inefficient use of the time and budget because you're doing this by hand or whatever it might be. Ineffective tracking of the partnerships, so you're not sure if they're going to be effective and they're going to be successful. Inability to demonstrate program success to top management. So, they're going to ask questions about what's going on, how are the partnerships going, how are the development objectives that should be tied to your business objectives, how are they going? You may not be able to do that. And then in the inability to actually evaluate and improve the program so that as you roll it out, then even being able to look at what kind of improvements do we want to make, what maybe changes or edits do we want to make to that mentoring program. So the way that we can help you through that is, again, through that MORE workshop and looking at it, and also through the Insala technology. Now, again, that MORE workshop is going to set everything up so that you've got a good, solid process and methodology, and then your technology is going to help you with real-time reporting. You're going to have tools to pull in valuable data, facilitate the program through surveys, and be able to analyze results, and then to be able to automate reporting of activities and progress. How are those developmental goals working? How are people working towards those goals? What kind of return on investment are we getting out of what we've done here? And then also your technology provides online tools to record and track objectives and the mentee's progress to those objectives and what they're doing. Now, the mistake number 3 that we see is mismatching mentors and mentees. And without a technology tool, what we see many times is a greater occurrence of mismatched pairs. And what that's going to cost you is, first of all, loss of time for the administrator because they've got to go back and do rematching. And then also for the participants in the program because they're not getting out of the program what they want to achieve in doing that. They're not going to get the development to meet the goals that they wanted to in the program. It's going to have a negative impact on the participants, and I guarantee you what's going to happen is they are going to blame the entire program and what they're doing, and it will leave a very bad taste in their mouth. And the next time you decide you want to roll out mentoring, it's a loss of mentoring program branding and credibility throughout the entire organization. So the way to avoid that mistake is, again, through the technology and a customizable matching tool that we have. The technology contains a mentoring questionnaire which allows you to implement an application process online. And you're able to also weight your compatibility of the specific needs. Have specific criteria that, again, is going to be tied back to those program objectives for your matching and pairing. And you're able to use an online tool to match and pair that enables those relationships. You can either have, self-matching, which allows mentees to go in and identify their own mentor, but with accurate data. to be able to do that and make an informed decision, and then that level of engagement in the program and in the process is higher. And then also it provides you with custom assessments to really provide you with information and make sure that, again, that matching and pairing is correct. And the last mistake that we see is that failure to communicate expectations and the rules. You know, every organization may have multiple expectations, and we talked about how, due to historical perceptions and misperceptions, misunderstandings of the program goals and individual roles can happen. We worked with an organization last year, and one of the things that we found was that there was a lot of information that was going to some managers, but not everybody was reading the emails going out, and then when someone asked them a question, they gave their own perceptions about being able to do that. And so this is what it can cost you to really be able to do that. Fewer high-quality individuals, even volunteering, because they've got historical misperceptions about what it takes to be a mentor and mentee. And we believe you should volunteer. There should not be a voluntold, but should be a volunteer. There's going to be negative program feedback coming from the stakeholders and definitely the participants in doing that. And then you also may have individuals who feel like they're left out, almost like, well, this program is only for that select few in what you're doing. And then the inability to define and measure your program's success and what you're doing. This becomes really very important in doing that. So the way that we can help you, and the way we do that, is provide portal communication tools in doing this. Now, part of this is going to come from that more workshop. Everything's got to start from that setting up your process and your program effectively, and then being able to integrate all of that information into your corporate communication channels and doing that. And actually having a message manager to leverage those online tool and resources. That's going to reinforce ongoing awareness. So it's not just the kickoff of the program, but it's that ongoing awareness, and ensuring through that ongoing awareness that you've got program, I should say correct program understanding of what you're doing. And then the other thing that we can do, because we've been doing this for over 24 years, and I've worked with organizations on a local level, national level, and an international level, and so we've worked in all different industries and all different areas, so we can provide you with some proven strategies so that when you have an issue that comes up, we have got a lot of history in working with all sizes of organizations to help you with in doing that. So Blake, if you can take us through this poll coming up, we'd like to find out if any of our participants have experienced these mistakes.
My pleasure. So of these mistakes we've mentioned, what, if any of these, do you wish you had implemented differently? Maybe not identifying organizational objectives, ineffective tracking and reporting of development. Was there any mismatching of mentors and mentees? Was there a failure to communicate expectations and the rules of engagement? Or none of the above? Your implementation went well. Take a few moments to respond to that, please. We also promise not to collect any responses about mistakes and send it to your leadership team. This is collected anonymously. Okay. 25% said that not identifying organizational objectives ahead of time. 38%, the majority, said it was ineffective tracking and reporting of development, which does touch back on that challenge of proper results and reporting tracking. And 13% for the other three, is mismatching mentors and mentees, failure to communicate, but 13% said that the implementation did go well. What do you think, Judy?
Well, I'm glad to hear that we had some areas where the implementation went well. Good for you. I'm so glad to hear that, because we want that to happen. The 38% on the tracking, again, this is not unusual, but a lot of times we find that tracking has to do not only with the lack of a technology tool, but also back to the 25% that said we didn't stop and look at the objectives and all the things up front that we might have been able to do. One of the things we talk about when we talk about the MORE workshop and clarifying those expectations and objectives and everything you want to do, it's setting up your program and your process and your methodology before you start rolling out your program. We kind of talk about it being the difference between ready, fire, aim, and ready, aim, fire in what you're doing. And I know that all of you are familiar with how that works in doing it. So, you know, one of the things is that we try to help you guard against potential mistakes in doing those things through that mentoring workshop, through customizable training sessions that we mentioned before in webinar or workshop format, whichever works best for you, providing consulting, because we've got that history of what we're doing. We've experienced just about all of it in doing that. And then one of the things that we really work with an organization on is making sure that it is continual evaluation and continual check-ins in doing that. And we can help you with that or set up questions and help you to do that. This probably number 4 is one of the things that is so incredibly important in doing that, because you don't want to just kick this off and, you know, let it go. And a lot of times that's what happens. In whatever program it is that you are implementing as an organization, you got this big hurrah and the big kickoff, and you do the things, and then you let it drop. And we believe that you have got to have those check-ins, that follow-up, that evaluation in what you're doing, because you want to make sure that, again, those historical misperceptions haven't kind of snuck in and taken over, and that the partnerships are going well in doing that. Actually, we suggest you have your first check-ins no later than 6 to 8 weeks after the partnership has begun. And the reason for that is because if there's a problem in the partnership, you want to catch it right away in what you're doing. So as a wrap-up, we've got 5 takeaways that we really hope that you have learned today. One is, and above all, and the reason it's number 1 in the beginning, is define clear business objectives. And you need to be able to do that, because we believe this is a business strategy, and if you want your program to be successful and if you want the support of senior management, make sure that you can tie the program to business objectives, and then make sure that you've got a good solid plan up front, especially your success measurements that you're going to do, and that you're looking at all of the things that need to be in place up front before you roll out your mentoring program, all those things to ensure you don't hit those pitfalls. Then we want to make sure that you engage everybody from the beginning. Make sure that you've trained everybody in doing this. Make sure there's clear communication to everybody so that everybody understands what their role is and what they're going to be able to do. And then, as I just mentioned, make sure you've got good, solid check-in points and a good, solid communication plan in what you're doing. You know, and once you have everybody engaged, you've got them trained, you've got them going, you've got the partnerships up and running, don't just let it drop. Keep everybody going, keep them engaged, and make sure there's those check-in points and clear communications. And then manage and put your data into practice. All of the things that you're talking about, if you can't track it, you can't report on it, and looking at that, it's not really going to make any difference, because the next time there's any kind of budget cut, the next time there's any kind of issue going on, your mentoring program will get dropped. But if you're able to tie it to organizational objectives, you're able to measure results, and you're able to take the data and make it trackable and make it reportable, then what you're going to do is that mentoring program will become clear, it will become visual, and it will become rewarding in what everybody's doing. What we really do is to try and take an organization from here and what they're doing and all the things that we know hit in a mentoring program and getting it, and taking them from here to here so that you have got competency-based goals, easy administration, you're able to give feedback and reports, clear matching and pairing, and you're able to actually be able to have multiple mentoring programs and manage those programs, and then make sure you've got good solid workflow. So the idea is to kind of take it from chaos to clarity in doing that. So what we want to do right now is to find out what questions that we have. So Blake, can you tell us about the questions?
Sure. So first question is a good one. How soon should mentoring start after you bring on a new hire? Maybe you can elaborate on what a program for new hires actually looks like.
Okay. I would say get them involved as quickly as possible with a mentor for a couple of reasons. And one of the things that we found in onboarding programs is, again, you come in, you've got orientation, and you've got information, and you're just inundated with it. And then you're set off to do your job. Now, orientation can be anything from a couple hours to a month, depending on your organization and what you do. But if they've got somebody that they can fall back on and talk to, that really makes a difference. We have found that when mentoring is implemented as quickly as possible after an individual comes into the organization, engagement levels are higher. The questions that went back to the human resource functions were less and less often, and the questions that went to the supervisor were less. Because what happened is the individual, was able to retain and kind of reinforce all that information that they'd learned. So, all those things were very positive. In addition to that, I can tell you from a measurement of bringing people up to speed faster, that individuals that have got a mentor that they can work with, and in some organizations there's two mentors. There's a mentor that is around the organizational and cultural issues, and there's a mentor that is around the specific job or skills in doing that. But having a mentor, the individual is able to get up to speed faster because they've got somebody they can go to, they've got somebody who is qualified, they've got somebody that they can reach out to whenever they've got questions. One of the things that I do want to reiterate is the fact that we believe that your mentors should volunteer and they should be qualified. One of those historical misperceptions around mentoring is that if somebody was good at what they did, they'd automatically be a good mentor. And unfortunately, when it comes to new hires, that's what we do. We put them with the person who is really good at their job. And guess what? It takes very different skills to be a mentor than it does just to be good at doing something. So if you're doing that, make sure the individual's got the relationship building skills, the communication skills, and those types of skills that it actually takes to be a mentor before you match them with a new hire.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Judy. Speaking of onboarding new hires, one of our attendees brought up that there tends to be confusion about the distinction between training and coaching and mentoring. So what do you see as being the key difference that sets mentoring apart from just training for on-the-job skills or coaching within the organization?
I would say probably one of the big things, and we get this quite often, and what's the difference between coaching and mentoring and doing that? And there's several things that we see, and that even goes back to the difference in opening training programs. I can go to a training program, and that tells me certain information, but it may not tell me what it looks like in real-world practical application in doing that. Also, again, and here's one of the things that we know, a lot of the original training we will take a new hire through. You might take them through anywhere from a day to 2 or 3 days in specific skill training for their job. And as OD people, we know that, it used to be, and I say used to be, that there was an 18 to 20% retention. Now, with busy lives, incredible, balanced work-life situations, our cell phones, computers, all those types of things that are liable to come into the training room, retention is down to 13%. So you got to think about that 13% that you are looking at. So what are you going to do about the rest of that? So the training, you've got a 13% retention of what's going on there. So where's the reinforcement going to come from in doing that? In addition to that, I might get certain information from a training program, and I need that information. We're not talking about doing away with your training programs. But again, it makes more sense to me when I see what that's like in a real-world situation. And one of the main differences that we see is that a mentor normally has been there, done that. They've got experience in the area that I'm learning. So I can get the practical application. I can get how that skill is used within the organization's culture in doing that. In addition to that, one of the biggest things that we see, I should say, between a coach and a mentor is many times a coach is focused on an event or a specific performance issue in doing that. A mentor is more interested in the individual overall and what they're doing, and they're not responsible or should not be responsible for the individual's performance in doing that. Now, I also want to say that we have been in some organizations where there are professional coaches that are involved, and so some of that might look a little different. But overall, those are some of the things that we've seen are differences between training and a coach that might talk to me about performance on a specific issue, and a mentor who's going to help me take that learning to practical application. There's somebody who's been there, done that. They probably can relate to my learning better than anyone else. Hopefully that was a pretty big, large question, but hopefully that provided some information to the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Judy. So when do you think mentors should be assigned by program administrators, and when should mentors and mentees actually be given the opportunity to self-match?
We're great believers in self-matching, but there's criteria that has to go with that. And first of all, you have got to make sure you've got good, solid, qualified mentors in what you're doing. Again, you've got to make sure that they've got the skills to be a mentor. They want to be a mentor. It's a volunteer. It's not voluntold. They're very clear about what's expected of them and what their role is. And the same thing with the mentee. The mentee, if they're going to do self-selection, should qualify. They should not be going into the mentoring partnership just to get promoted. And so they should be going into the mentoring partnership to learn, to develop. We believe the number one criteria for matching and pairing and a mentoring program is development. Now, if development helps somebody to take on more complex assignments, that's great, but it's not about promotion. So you've got to make sure you've got good qualified mentors. You've got to make sure that you've got good qualified mentees that understand their role and are clear about why they're going into a mentoring partnership and what they want to learn. And if you've got that, and there is a way to provide good, solid information through a technology tool or whatever you use, good, solid profile information about the mentor, we believe the mentee can make a good, solid, informed decision. And we have found that when mentees are allowed to choose their own mentors, it's a higher level of engagement in the program, the partnership, and so on. In addition to that, the question was around when should a program administrator. I would say a program administrator can help even if there's self-selection going on. The program administrator, might be able to help when somebody says, I just don't know. I just don't know what to do. The other way that we have seen program administrators help is in an onboarding program, because the new hires coming in don't know anybody. So a program administrator helping in that situation can be very important, because the new hire doesn't know anybody. And the other area that we have seen where program administrators seem to be involved more often is in a high-level diversity program, where the program objectives are around making sure that individuals of a specific diverse group are actually matched with other individuals within the organization. So I would say onboarding and diversity are the two areas where you might want to consider a program administrator doing the matching. But in other situations, make sure you've got good quality mentors that understand their role, mentees that are in it for the right reasons and understand their role, and then let them self-select.
Judy, about how long should a successful mentoring relationship engagement last?
That's a question we get all the time, and my feeling is somewhere around 9 to 12 months. And the reason for that is many times 6 months is too short, because it really depends on your program and how often the mentors and mentees are going to meet. We had one organization we were going to work with, and they were going to start out with a 6-month program, but the mentors and mentees were only going to meet once a month. That's not really a whole lot of time. You know, an hour a month for 6 months, you're not going to get a whole lot done, and you're going to spend the first probably couple of months just establishing a partnership. So I feel personally that somewhere between 9 and 12 months is the best time. Anything much over 12 months, quite honestly, they probably have accomplished what they wanted in the partnership. They don't meet that much anymore anyway.
Great. So about how long, what suggestions do you have for measuring the success of the program itself?
Okay, yeah, this is a question that always comes up, and there's a couple of different ways that we do this. And again, first of all, you've got to have clear organizational objectives in doing that. But one of the ways that we have seen organizations be able to measure mentoring, and it's not just on onboarding, but onboarding can be a part of that, has been around accelerating that learning curve. So that individuals that, in fact, we specifically had one organization where the learning curve to get somebody up to speed, not necessarily a new hire in the organization, but a new hire into that role, to get somebody up to speed was about 18 months, and we were able to cut that down to 13 and be able to do that. Excuse me. We've also seen this in being able to look and say the individuals are getting the development they need and they haven't gone to a training class. So you've got the savings having to do with you haven't had to create the course, you haven't had to deliver it, there's time off the job, all kinds of savings that are there because the individual's getting the development they need through a mentoring partnership in being able to do that. So I would say the two most common ways are accelerating that learning curve, and also we've seen that happen with leadership skills also, where individuals are able to get information and development from internal mentors versus just going to a training class or whatever it might be, because again, they're getting practical application and they are getting how the concepts they've learned in leadership programs, training programs they've gone to, how it's used within the organization.
Thanks, Judy. Well, it looks like we're about out of time at this point. I'd like to say thanks to our audience for all of the great questions they submitted. Judy, do you have any final thoughts?
No, we do want you to check our website. There's a lot of resources, white papers, articles, past webinars that we've done that you will find on our website. In addition to that, we really would like for you to join our LinkedIn group around mentoring, and not only just to join, but to contribute. We have well over 800 participants at this point in time. And I just would like to thank everybody for their participation, and if there's a question that you had that we weren't able to answer, please let us know what that is.